Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the program. It's always a pleasure to be with you all. Today is a special conversation. We're actually joined by someone I've grown very close to, someone I do admire in this ecosystem, and someone who represents exactly what the space needs more of. She's an inspiration for young women who want to step into financial markets with integrity, curiosity, and courage. What I respect most about Bree is the fact that she's asking the right questions and she's asking them from the right place. And that matters so much. So it's a real pleasure to have you here, Bree. Thanks for joining us on short notice.
Thank you so much, Verson. It's an honor to be here. And I'm so grateful for our friendship and everything I've learned from you. You're really, truly an amazing mentor.
Oh, thanks so much. That's very sweet. Edo, it's great to see you. You're a few minutes late again. I'm just kidding.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, even though I was 5 minutes late. I am Italian, so that's not being late. I was quite early if I take the European standards. And I want to send a special thanks to the audience. I know we have already 500 people that immediately tuned in, so I also apologize for those 5 minutes delay.
I was just kidding. You are in Dubai, if I'm not mistaken, right? And
well, the background doesn't lie.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we do have a lot to unpack here today. And, you know, it's very important to acknowledge that today's discussion is simply not about reacting to the headlines that we've been seeing coming out. We're going to try our best to really slow down the noise and try to connect the dots between all the events that are playing out. And it's interesting because on the surface, they appear to be very unrelated, but underneath, you guys already know how tightly and interwoven this is. And you know, I've said this so many times, but it's important to reiterate it. I really love the fact that we space out the turning point weekly because it's not about that there's a lack of information. The problem is that there's too much information. And when you look at the pace of how the financial and political developments are unfolding in real time, it's really accelerating to a point where like it's so hard for us to grasp like all these moving pieces, and we have to kind of take a step back and think instead of react. So let's kind of like set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. And a lot has transpired this past week alone. Now, we did see a massive sell-off in the markets, and it's very important to acknowledge that this did not happen in isolation, and it never does. When market events are at this magnitude and you see these massive sell-offs, they're not spontaneous. When you start to examine how everything is playing out, very carefully, you start to notice something very critical, that this alignment and coordinated sell-off is tied to multiple things at once. For instance, we did see the announcement of the Fed chair. And I want to be very clear, this gentleman is not really serving the American people's interests, okay? And that's a whole different discussion we don't have to get into. And then on top of that, we did see the release, and it is a controlled release of the Epstein files. So we're having distraction and disclosure at the same time. And that's what triggered a lot of the market sell-off. Finally, what I'll say is, while everyone was focusing on the Epstein files now, and this information has been out there for many years, but we saw a lot of money move very carefully and quietly. We saw a coordinated sell-off in gold and silver, which was tied to leverage trading. And at the same time, there's real reports confirming that they started buying back again after this coordinated sell-off. We saw the same thing in crypto. So we're going to dive into all of this and, of course, talk about the whole Bitcoin Epstein files. I think that's going to be very interesting. And again, sorry to hijack so much of the intro, but just wanted to set the stage so we can break this down a little bit more. Bree, you're our guest today, so let's go ahead and start with you. What are your thoughts overall of everything that you've seen played out this week?
Well, obviously Friday was a huge day. We saw basically silver go from 3 digits to under $80. I remember I was at home and my brother texted me the spot price of silver, and I was just baffled. I think it was at $79, and immediately I actually tried to buy. I tried to buy the dip. I couldn't. I have some of my family uses Glint. No one could actually put in orders, but I think it's really obvious what they're doing. JP Morgan is all over this, and it is obviously devastating to see people having to sell. And I think it was all orchestrated. And I do think that the announcement of possibly with Kevin Warsh, this was evidence that this is some type of psyop to make it seem like we're going back, cash is king, rather than having precious metals to preserve our wealth. So I think really what's going on is the banks are trying to capture silver at such a low price, and people, unfortunately, were having to, like, they had stop orders and they were being liquidated, and then the banks came in, bought up all that silver at, like, I don't know, $79, $83, and they just got a bunch of silver on sale. And it's not that one day we woke up and silver, all of a sudden, silver and gold became less valuable. That just didn't happen. I just think this entire thing is some type of psyops.
Yeah. If I can add to that, and I do want to get your take, Edo, but what you're saying then is that gold and silver were pushed into this correction, not because of the fundamentals, but because, and the demand did not disappear, but this was done intentionally. So the corrections are really designed to, like you said, shake out the weak hands and let the retail panic do the work. So the institutions can buy.
And then, then the banks were the ones that were actually buying up all of the silver and gold. And I think it was about like $12 trillion.
I wouldn't be surprised. But to your point, this is certainly observable behavior, and we've actually seen this many times. And every transition in money follows the very same script. Fear is going to drive the behavior. The behavior is, well, capital is going to move before the behaviors take place. And then you see capital flows back into the dollar, and that's really to push people, like you said, into dollar promises, not hard assets.
Yeah. And then I do also think what they're trying to do is obviously like save the dollar, tell people that cash is king again. But the thing is, we can't save the dollar with the amount of debt we have. It's totally impossible. Even if they go ahead and, increase the interest rates, it would just be a nightmare. We would totally become bankrupt. It's not possible.
Yeah, we already are bankrupt. All right, Edo, your turn.
Great insights from both of you, but I also want to share one important piece of the puzzle. So about 2 weeks ago, and this, I don't know how a lot of people are not paying attention to this, but there is a very known markets manipulator, a crypto platform. Probably you know which one I'm talking about. I'm going to bring that to the screen. So Binance has listed futures contracts for both golds, precious metals, and silver. So it's very interesting that this took place just a couple of days before these massive liquidation events that we have seen with both gold and silver, right? So this is definitely not a coincidence. And to add to what Brie has just explained, of course, when you have something that has intrinsic value, just like is the case for silver, central banks do have liabilities, and they are not being able to keep up with those liabilities. Hence why this has been an orchestrated move so that central banks could accumulate large sums of both gold and silver. And simultaneously, they liquidated trillions of dollars. So always people speculating on prices are getting wiped out. This is why we don't recommend people to do leverage trading in a market where there's heavy manipulation. And I remind you all that JP Morgan was fined in the past for manipulating and suppressing the price precisely of silver. So if they do that with precious metals, which has an intrinsic value and is already being utilized at industrial scale, can you imagine what they are capable of doing with cryptocurrencies, specifically with the price of BTC? If they are capable to suppress the price of silver, they are also capable of artificially inflating the price of BTC. And I wanted to start this conversation with the precious metals, and back there, we're going to rotate towards digital assets and the Epstein files. But it seems to me that there has been coordination.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's really what I find most interesting about this. And frankly, most revealing is because when you did see these corrections, you did start seeing massive buying again. So again, it's important to reiterate that they're trying to push people back into the dollar as out of fear. And this is what they're doing to get other people to carry their burden of debt while they go ahead and quietly position themselves in real assets. And now tying this into digital currencies, we're going to slowly shift here, is that there is going to be this marriage between blockchain and a basket of commodities as well. whole different discussion. So it's quite clear what they're trying to do here is that they're trying to confiscate wealth and reset the monetary system where essentially, I'm sorry, someone said move closer to the mic. My apologies. Pretty much create a new class of serfs. There's no other way to sugarcoat this. So I'm very interested to hear your insights. And I know Edo also did an incredible video yesterday on the whole Bitcoin narrative. Bree, real quick, what are your thoughts on this whole Epstein Bitcoin thing?
Okay, so I do think it's interesting timing that all of a sudden all of these documents are being surfaced on social media. I was actually speaking with a friend yesterday about this, and honestly, it seems like a big distraction. I didn't really pay too close of attention to this. I had a friend that did a deep dive on Epstein's connection to Bitcoin. His name is Aaron Day, and he did a great dive. This was probably a couple months ago now. And I do think Bitcoin was hijacked. It's pretty obvious at this point that Bitcoin was intended for peer-to-peer cash, and it obviously isn't being used for that. You can go into the block size wars, all of that. But I think all of this is a distraction to get the normal retail investor not buying up gold and silver, not holding physically, not preserving their wealth. And, you know, when you have the entire internet fixated on what's going on with Epstein rather than what's right in front of them, it becomes pretty obvious.
Yeah. Oh, really well said. And just, you know, to recap, maybe you don't know this, Bree, but it was 2021 where I was talking a lot about this Bitcoin and the nefariousness behind it. And I was punished for it. My YouTube channel did get shut down because I was talking about a lot of the illicit activities with Bitcoin and how it was hijacked and things of that nature. So the same thing happened to Edo too. Now, that narrative was not popular, and it's gradually now coming to the surface. It's also very uncomfortable to start to talk about the involvement of how deep this rabbit hole really goes. And, you know, it's just becoming very clear that Bitcoin was really the narrative and the distraction, while on the other side, we have this parallel economy that's gradually being built. And we'll start to talk about that. Did you say amen?
Yeah, well, it's true. I have a friend, and you can look into his story, but Roger Ver released a book called The Hijacking of Bitcoin, and you can look into what happened to him after that. I'll just leave it with that.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there was also a gentleman, I have this on my X, this young kid who was trying to expose the Tether relationship at that point.
Oh, interesting.
And, you know, he was found drowned. Yeah, because he exposed some trafficking networks. So we got to be very careful with this material.
Yeah,
but,
of course.
you know, Edo, what are your thoughts?
Well, I already lost my Twitter account, so I'm going to be quite cautious with my words. But what I explained on the video yesterday, and trying to keep it inside within YouTube guidelines, is that blockchain technology is not what most people think it is, or at least when I first got in crypto back in 2017, I had this idea of decentralization and getting rid of the banks. That's why I was initially attracted to the idea of blockchain technology. But once I started to go deep and I started to unveil some connections, and you go from the fact that Ripple apparently is not just a private company, but it has ties with central, I don't know if I should say these things on the live stream, but it has ties with Central Intelligence. It's a 3-letter government agency in the United States. And it might sound crazy, but the same people, like you have early BTC developers, and David Schwartz is one of them. And he's also it's also involved with the creation of the XRP ledger. He's one of the 3 architects of the XRP ledger. So my take from this, and without violating YouTube guidelines, is that they rolled out BTC as a test net, okay? They allows the most brilliant minds on this planet to exploit bugs, and then you have all of the developers incentivized by money. And in the background, you developed what happens to be the final version of BTC. Because when you look at the white paper, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, you start to ask questions, because BTC can't function as a currency. So it's really diverting from Satoshi's initial vision in the white paper. So you can argue it has been hijacked. you can argue it has failed as a currency. And then you have XRP that one by one solves every single one of BTC flaws. Whether we're talking about scalability, high energy consumption, high transaction fees, even centralization of the mining.
I want to interrupt you for 1 second. I think the one thing that XRP does not solve is private money. And I think Zcash actually did. It was created shortly after Bitcoin to solve that one issue. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents quickly.
Well, thank you for that. I think we should explore that a little more. Maybe next time we get together.
That was a big flaw about Bitcoin, was it wasn't private. Everything is public.
If I could also make a statement now before. Okay, I'm so sorry, Edo, but one thing, Bree, like I've talked about this with a lot of people too, and I do my due diligence as well. And as far as privacy coins, I find it very challenging to see how there could be privacy to begin with, because on the blockchain, you have a lot of transparency. And the other side of this is you need to go through banks at some point to even access this technology, to buy it. You need to have an internet connection, and the internet connection is a beast of the intelligence agencies. So to even access the internet, you're going to be, noticed. Somebody's going to be watching you. So I can see how there could be privacy in a sense that if we had a parallel economy where we are transacting amongst each other, you provide a service to me, I pay you for it. But it's very challenging to see how there could be some form of decentralization. I mean, true decentralization.
Yeah, so I mean,
as long as banks are involved in all of this.
I think a rebuttal to that would be, using some type of mixed net. I had an episode where I interviewed the founder of NIM recently, and that's the most decentralized VPN you could get. So, first of all, making sure that your connection is private, and then also, being able to, like, a good example is being paid in these privacy coins, but also starting off with maybe Bitcoin or something, and then swapping it on some type of swapping platform. And then you're able to actually get the private, Monero or Zeno or Zcash. So there are ways. It's just a little bit more complicated, and the user experience is not perfect. And I think that's why a lot of people aren't really using, like, the normal person is not using privacy coins.
Yes, I agree with you. Okay. Well, real quick, Edo, please finish your thought. I'm so sorry to cut you off like that.
Yeah, I know she put a nice video, I think, with Zcash founder, right?
I had an episode out with Arjun, who worked for the Zcash Foundation. I have another episode on Zcash coming out in about 2 weeks with someone actually who's going to reveal a lot what's going on. That's all I know more
about Zcash. What I do know is that the XRP ledger does have a private network as well. Of course, it kind of operates as a side chain, but it keeps up with efficiency. So by the fact that banks will be utilizing a blockchain, I think in the future, if they want to implement CBDCs, I think they will not allow privacy. Maybe Zcash can be a parallel solution. I don't really know a lot about it. I would like to research more. But just to conclude, from my view, I think they released blockchain technology as a way to get the world's population used to digital transactions, because it's also part of the plan to eliminate cash transactions, because nobody can track. If you really want to stay anonymous, I truly believe the way is to use physical cash, and they really making it more and more difficult to just use cash. I mean, just a couple of months ago, I was at a hotel in Paris, and I was not even allowed to pay in cash for more than like 300 euros. So there's no doubt. I don't know the situation in America, but I can talk about the situation in Europe. And this trend is actually going very, very serious, because they are limiting the amount of cash that we can actually hold, and that we can actually pay for goods and services, and not even huge amounts. As I said, $300, it was not even allowed in Paris. So it's quite concerning, and I think they really rolled out BTC as a beta test coin, some sort of test net network, and then, of course, the same people who create, not all of them, but you can have, for example, David Schwartz. He was indeed an early BTC developer. That's no secret. And then together with Jed McCaleb and Arthur Brito, they started to develop a more sophisticated network, which happens to be the XRP ledger that can scale up to thousands of transactions per second. Can also use federated sidechains to actually fulfill the demands of financial institutions. But my whole point is that I truly lost that initial vision that I had back in 2017 when I was much more naive than I am today. I was just a teenager. And it's very clear that blockchain technology is not what they tell us about. And second, that Satoshi Nakamoto is definitely not someone like a random person that came out with this technology. Is actually tied to the US government. That's what I can say.
Yeah. And also with Satoshi, if you look on like old Bitcoin forums, he was really nowhere to be found. He kind of just popped out of nowhere. It's a bit suspicious. So I agree with you.
Well, the Bitcoin, the mathematical model behind Bitcoin appeared shortly after the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah.
And if you look prior to that, and that's something that I found very fascinating when I was watching the interview that Epstein did with Steve Bannon the other day.
Oh, yeah.
If you pay close attention, there's a moment in there where he explains how a certain amount of money was confiscated and with the Rockefeller Foundation. Now, you could tie that into Catherine Austin Fitts and her research talking about the 2.1 trillion that disappeared. And apparently that money was given to Los Alamos Laboratories, where some of the mathematicians and physicists over there could come up with a mathematical model where the institutions could make more money and essentially build some new system. Now, I think that was tied to Bitcoin in some way, form, or fashion. Or and also it was given to a lot of the Five Eyes intelligence agencies. But you know, that rabbit hole goes so deep on so many levels, and that's kind of what I said in the beginning. There's so many moving pieces, and it's almost impossible to keep holding these threads. So, looking at the bigger picture of all of this, one thing is definitely clear that, for instance, a Bitcoin was not created anonymously. Okay, now they say it's anonymous by design. And they did that intentionally because it's framed as untraceable and originalist, right? But when you look even closer and analyze pretty much the network, the incentives behind it, it's another form of QE, you could say. Look at the early mining distribution. Look at the geopolitical alignment behind the narrative and the propaganda pushing it. The intelligence level infrastructure that we're talking about here that overlapped. Basically, I'm just saying you see this pattern emerge. And the serious researchers in this ecosystem have pointed this out for so many years, way before we even got involved in this, okay? It's not monetary rebellion. It's shaped in a way that is designed to influence and allow people to leverage trade. At the same time, it goes far beyond retail speculation. So the way I see Bitcoin, and like I said, I think it was always a distraction and a wealth confiscation mechanism. But something along the lines have been quietly building in parallel, and that's where Ripple and Stellar enter the conversation. It's very interesting, and I'm just happy to be able to unpack this a little bit more with you guys. So, real quick, I do want to get Edo's take on where we're going now with everything coming out as far as the narrative, because this whole Bitcoin Ripple Stellar connection email, I mean, we don't even know if it's real. We really don't. But it could be. And one thing is clear, Edo, and you guys know this, but the real pattern is clear when you start to look at about the interference in what Ripple and some of these other technologies have been doing, because it simply killed and exposed their network when they needed to keep this criminal enterprise, this trafficking network to keep going, to keep the business alive. I mean, that's how deep this goes. Thoughts?
Well, I do want to share one quick video. Probably you have watched this one. Version is from the Homeland Security Agency. Have you watched this one from an agent that's met Satoshi like 10 years ago? Have you ever watched this one?
You're talking about Craig?
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to bring this to the screen, so it's very interesting. And by the way, guys, I'm using Facebook. Don't judge me. I don't have Twitter anymore, and that's where I have some of the stuff that I still watch. So But yes, I did post this video a long time ago on Twitter. So it's just 1 minute, and then I'm going to give you some context. And let me know, Bersan, have you watched this one?
Just make sure the volume's up.
Yeah, I'm going to.
No, I haven't seen it. I mean,
oh
just
my
the way I
God,
see
man.
it.
I'm bringing you the hidden gems here. So I'm going to play it.
Okay.
Point we had seized. We looked at Bitcoin. It was the most prevalent at that point. We had seized quite a bit of it, millions of dollars worth under the Silk Road investigation. So one of our agents who started looking at another online marketplace through the deep web, which was called Black Market Reloaded, they were sending weapons through packages and ordering them on the dark web. And he was really, really smart, forward-leaning agent. And he goes, I want to go interview Satoshi Nakamoto. And we're like, what? He said, yeah, I want to go interview this guy. And at the time, we're like, hey, it's a figment of somebody's imagination. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not true. So, we had all this pushback from our headquarters. And we thought, hey, if an agent wants to go talk to him and we have some money, why don't we send him? Let's find out how this works. So as it came to be, the agents flew out to California and they realized that he wasn't alone in creating this. There were 3 other people, and they sat down and met with them and talked to them to find out how this actually works and what the reason for it was.
Now, this woman talking is not a random person. She's an agent for the Homeland Security Agency. So she's a government contractor in the United States. And she's basically telling that Satoshi is basically an organization. It's not one person, it's a group. They are actually 3 Satoshis. And this is just a public admission. And I think this video is very interesting. Well, I spent a vast amount of my time on the internet researching on this subject, so that's why I am so passionate about talking about it. But we have to keep it within the YouTube guidelines. Bersan, want to make some thoughts on this one, and I also want to hear.
Yeah, actually, I want to give Bree more of the floor.
No, you go ahead, and then
you're getting a lot of love in the comments, Bree. So this is good. We have to bring you back on again.
I mean, I don't want to speculate with this. I feel like I have very much so like a conspiracy theory, but I wouldn't be surprised if a 3-letter agency is entirely behind Bitcoin, just like Ido was saying. And I think it's awful how much Bitcoin they've seized, and it seems like it was an easy way for them, because we were talking about how Bitcoin is not anonymous. They were able to track basically everything going on the Silk Road and on other dark markets. So it became very easy for them to confiscate.
Yeah, it could also be a form of blackmail if you really think about it too, because it's almost like setting up a snare. And if you look at some of the transactions that have been taken, it's not really decentralized. It has been used to finance proxy wars and all kinds of other material. If I'm not mistaken, there was a weapons cache payment that was settled with Ukraine, and they used Bitcoin for this.
Yeah, and another thing that I think that really needs to be discussed, and probably the average person isn't aware, but Bitcoin, it is a decentralized network, but the mining is not decentralized. You have these huge corporations now that are responsible for all of the mining. So these people could easily be targeted. They could easily be, the government could come up to them and say, hey, I want you to blacklist these addresses. I want you to censor this. And they become used as almost like political pawns, and they're obviously gaining a bunch of money. So like, why wouldn't they do that? And I think China's doing this. I think the US is doing this, and people really need to understand this phenomenon.
I totally agree with you. So let's talk now about solutions and where things are going. One thing is clear, is that we do see now this narrative as far as exposing the whole Bitcoin Epstein thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're going to start to see compliance maybe come into play. I'm talking about real guidelines, real regulation, some of the things we've been talking about on this channel for many years. It's very possible now we're going to see the narrative shift toward the alternative to Bitcoin in the grand scheme of things. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Edo.
No, go ahead. We have a guest. I want to hear from Brie first, and then
I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say also what Bersan was mentioning. Like, we don't even know if these records are true. You know, if these emails actually happened, I mean, it's pretty hard to prove that. These all could be used as a narrative to end up like really removing more of our freedoms. We saw this obviously with the Patriot Act. So I wouldn't be surprised if all of this is total BS. And I know that sounds pretty wild, but like, why not? They are going to lead to more regulations, like Versan was saying. Obviously, we're seeing, the Clarity Act, and what is that going to end up doing for DeFi? Are they going to create even more regulations? Is there going to be limits now on how much Bitcoin I could send? Say I'm making a payment. Am I going to have to keep even more of a record of this? Am I going to have to provide this to the government? It's really not used for digital cash anymore. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is going to lead to more regulations.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I've always thought that the end game, like I'm like Edo in many ways, in the mindset. In the earlier days, I actually touted this technology so much, like blockchain, the decentralization of it. And the more research I did, the more it became clearer and clearer that they were pretty much consolidating wealth and slapping on the regulations to control whatever's next. So I think they're playing controlled opposition at all times in any given scenario for every narrative you hear. And that's how they keep us really opposing ourselves, fighting with each other, debating, and not really focusing on the signal, right? So like even when we look at the whole Epstein Bitcoin thing, whether these documents are legit or not, I think is irrelevant because it could be treated as circumstantial or secondary, right? But the fact remains that there has been this massive interference. You could go all the way back to 2020 and this overwhelming evidence of aggressive suppression of the XRP price. And this goes back to the highest levels of finance, including JP Morgan. We could go back to ETHgate, the Securities Exchange Commission with Senator Warren and Maxine Waters. Do you guys remember that with FTX?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you got to keep the bigger picture in mind. And what I think is happening ultimately is that I do think you're going to see a lot of money flee speculation and go into compliance just for safety reasons. And the other thing is, I really think, when you bring in the Clarity Act, you do kill a lot of the ecosystem as well, because you're talking about now separating the technologies that really provide a value. And that's where the real value is in crypto. It's not in the speculative nature of it. It's being treated like a casino at this moment, and it's been financialized. But the end game is really the efficiencies and the value that it could really provide. And when I'm moving payments, I move money every day. It's expensive. I'm paying money like $7 for a transaction fee of whatever, right? It's just when you're moving lots of money, there's a lot of friction, and that is a problem. It's not fair. Why the hell am I paying so much money to move a small amount of value? So I think that's where the real value is in the distributed ledger technology, is providing some real efficiencies that don't just benefit us, but also benefit the ones in control. I think that's where this is going. And it's very clear that XRP and XLM do play, I think, the most critical role and very complementary. And we can discuss that further later. But just curious to see how you guys see this unfolding, like moving forward. Where are we going? And for the audience, the price of XRP going down is simply because it's tied to the debt markets again. When the debt markets are expanding, that's when Bitcoin climbs. You're going to see the rest of the market follow along with it. And when you see contractions like this coordinated sell-off, markets are going to come down. But I do believe there's going to be a decoupling in some way, form, or fashion sooner or later. I mean, it's so obvious at this point that something's going to break.
Well, I think we are heading towards what I call to be a crypto reset, and the Clarity Act is going to play a pivotal role in this process. One thing I want to bring to the screen is that we have a lot of BTCs that are being sent to centralized exchanges right now. This is from BlackRock ETFs. I have spotted on-chain movements from MicroStrategy also, because the price now is very close to liquidation price from Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy. So what I think is happening right now is that MicroStrategy is bleeding. If you take inflation into account, they are not even in profits anymore. They are, without inflation, they are basically 5 to 7% above their average purchasing price. And what I think is happening right now, and just to give some context, I'm removing the image, but just to give some context, what Michael Saylor did, he bought vast amounts of BTC using someone else's money. He basically borrowed that capital, and actually the creditors are getting upset, of course, because the liquidation price is very close. So he's not going to even have a choice. At some point, he's going to have to start liquidating his holdings. And I think it's no coincidence that right now we have all of the Epstein files, and that's also taking a massive hit on BTC. You have people who are literally dumping BTC because they don't want to be associated with a coin that has been involved for nefarious activities that I don't even want to mention on this podcast. As I said before, it's not even a theory anymore. I mean, Epstein has helped to fund early BTC development, so he has massive influence on the network. Of course, you can debate that, because otherwise, like, I would not sell BTC for this reason, because if you use the US dollar, then it's basically the same principle, right? The US dollar is also used for nefarious practices, but you can't deny that BTC is taking a big hit right now. And I think the Clarity Act is going to further push the narrative that the ones coming out on top of this are going to be the tokens that have intrinsic value, backed by large enterprises that are standing on the right side of the law, that are aligned with policymakers, and then it's where comes Ripple, Stellar. Can you guys hear me? Because I got a feeling I was frozen. Yeah. Okay, thanks. So I do think that the Clarity Act is about separation. I think in this moment, and this is not a financial advice, you should be shrinking your crypto portfolio, getting rid of meme coins, getting rid of cryptocurrencies that don't have intrinsic value, perhaps get some precious metals, and just run away from speculation, because, as I said, this will be a crypto reset. And as Brad Garlinghouse says many years ago, 99% of the crypto markets are going to disappear, and we are watching this in real time. When you look at the charts, most cryptocurrencies are sitting below bear market prices. They didn't even have a bull run. We were lucky because we invested in XRP, XLM, and they basically outperformed the markets. Remember, XRP was just 70 cents, 50 cents for a long time. We at least experienced XRP to go above $3, and now XRP is still sitting at least at 300 or 400% up from what the price used to be in the beginning of this cycle. But when you go to the traditional cryptocurrencies, they didn't have a bull run. We had less active participants in the markets, less order books, less people getting involved in the crypto markets, more market manipulation. And honestly, I don't see the majority of cryptocurrencies ever recovering, I have to be honest.
Yes, absolutely. Bree, you have your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's wise to be holding gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies that actually have utility. And so I completely agree with everything you said regarding that. A lot of these coins are never going to recover. But I think that's why, the XRP community, the XLM community is a very special community. We know what we hold. And I think it also goes back to what we were saying in the beginning of this episode regarding silver. Just because silver dropped to the 70s doesn't mean that silver was actually worth $79, and it's the same with XRP. It's like, I don't know what it's sitting at right now, but XRP is a lot more valuable than the price we're seeing on Coinbase market cap. And, when you know what you hold, you're going to win in the long run.
I agree with you. And like we said in the beginning, really, it's about recognizing the pattern and understanding that markets, media narratives, disclosures, monetary policy, I mean, none of this moves independently. I mean, they move together, but it's pretty damn clear the value of XRP. Like Nathan said on our podcast 2 weeks ago, even if you were speculating on it, the price should be significantly higher compared to what Bitcoin is or what it's trading at currently.
Yeah.
Now, there is again this evidence of this suppressing the XRP price. So it's going to be clear where this is going later on down the road. And typically, the idea is to anticipate these things before they happen, not at the last second until after the move is done. And what I'd like to reiterate, something I've been pushing alongside a lot of you guys in the community for the last 8 years, is again the reinforcement of how there's going to be this marriage between the two. You have to look at the facts. Number one, despite the volatility you see in the market, and remember, volatility is opportunity for those who see the signal. Central banks, financial institutions, and the regulatory bodies, they have all aggressively been buying hard assets. So we're coming back to gold and silver now. They're not doing this for show. They're doing this because they're trying to strengthen their reserves and to comply with Basel III liquidity rules. That goes back to the Bank of International Settlements, which gold is a tier 1 asset class. Like, people just forget about that. It's like, oh, the price of gold came down, but they forget that it is treated as freaking collateral. That's a big distinction there. That means the bond market is dead, and they're just doing everything they can via stable coins to keep it afloat so people don't panic. And so people, I mean, the institutions can front run all of us on this. The second thing is, the very same institutions I just mentioned are the very same ones pushing for tokenization. That means turning physical assets, tangible assets, the value of that, onto the blockchain, where it can be moved instantly, securely, transparently on these networks. Okay. So this makes gold and this basket of commodities, just hard assets in general, a practical solution in today's digital financial system when you're talking about having real collateral backing value. This is so important. And we can't dismiss it. And every time we do these podcasts, we have to constantly reinforce this, because I think we're early. We're not wrong about this. And this is exactly what's playing out in real time. Finally, the third thing that we can tie into this is the fact that each of these institutions I mentioned as well, adopting, buying gold and adopting the regulatory frameworks for Basel, they are also adopting Ripple's infrastructure. I'm talking about Ripple Net. So again, the compliance behind it and having gold as a collateral and a digital counterpart. That's a real breakthrough in this technology. I think so. Is to get real assets moving in a digital format all around the world. That's the breakthrough in the technology, in my opinion. I don't think it's delusional, like some people are saying. And I feel very sad for these people, because they're blind and they just don't understand these big pieces that are playing out. They're just naive.
Could you explain for the audience a little bit more about how we could have a cryptocurrency that's gold backed? I know you've talked about this in some of your other episodes, and I find this really interesting.
Well, gold has to be audited first. When you start looking at central banks and these central authorities, if they're buying the gold, obviously they're going to be auditing the gold. Now you need to find some trusted partner. I think that would be Ripple. They're applying to become a bank, if you will. So there's going to be a trust. And essentially, you're going to have the value of these physical assets. And I'm not a mathematician. You can break this down. There are people out there who have done the math. And what you do is you slap it on a blockchain. That value is just considered at all times. And with tokenization, you can fractionalize gold. You can fractionalize any amount of value. So you have now a solution where you actually bring value into the new financial system. And of course, you can break it down into little pieces. So if you want to pay for a cup of coffee, you can essentially pay in 0.001 XRP, but in backed by gold. So, I mean, I've written extensively about this. It's a lot of information, but it ultimately ties into the bigger picture of what I've been trying to share with people for many years now. So I don't think I'm wrong. It was the World Gold Council who initially said this. If people actually listen to some of the real economists out there who don't get a lot of mainstream attention or even follow the BIS, this is what they've been saying for years. It's not me.
I want to make some comments on this one, because what you said is definitely possible. I went through a very deep investigation on how XRP could be gold backed, or at least some sort of intersection between XRP and precious metals. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying this will happen. I'm just saying that is technically possible. And the key here is the escrow. So the XRP ledger does not have smart contract features, but it does have the escrow that can mimic some of the features of smart contracts in a way that it can control, or at least have some sort of control over the circulating supply. So you could fractionalize golds, and of course you would need institutions involved, as Versan said. I think we would need perhaps the World Bank or the Bank of International Settlements that could provide the regulatory framework to make this happen. The IMF could hold XRP into an SDR, special drawing rights, in some sort of way that XRP is inside a basket of currencies. And they could algorithmically tie XRP to fractions of golds using the escrow in a way that whenever there is more to maintain the peg between XRP and golds, you then proceed to use the escrow to release more tokens in circulation so that you can maintain the peg. And if actually the price is going down, then you just release or actually lock more tokens into the escrow in a way that you can bypass the smart contracts, because it doesn't have by default smart contracts on chain. So this is a way that XRP could be backed by golds.
Well, like I said many times, it's not really about competing with gold. It's about basically being a digital counterpart to it. So, having a gold-backed XRP, it doesn't mean that gold, it's basically, how do I have to word this correctly, because I don't want people to be misunderstanding what I'm trying to say here. And I've repeated this over and over. I've clarified myself many times, but you have to understand that XRP, in so many ways, it's designed almost to function like gold. Okay. So we're talking about moving value with finality. Now that distinction is so important because in a tokenized financial system, assets don't need to live on the same balance sheet to be functionally linked, if you will. They just need a common settlement rail. And that's ultimately what I think the language model is providing, right? So gold, if you look very closely, it's already being remonetized. And this is being done quietly. Eventually, it's going to be more clear. Those who have been doing research, they obviously see this, okay? Again, the central banks are accumulating it. Basel III elevated it to tier 1. That means gold is increasingly becoming pristine as collateral, not just a relic. Okay, so what is the missing piece to this this breakthrough? Okay, it's speed, it's interoperability, it's finality, and that needs a settlement rail that is not fragmented like the dollar. Okay, so I think the digital rails, that's where they come in. That's all I'm saying. Right now, if you imagine gold being tokenized by sovereigns, central banks, financial institutions, and I'm not talking about paper gold, so no derivatives, no synthetic exposure, allocated, audited, like you said, Edo. Now, physical gold represented digitally, okay? And that's how you have a breakthrough there. So I'm just trying to put 2 and 2 together, and I'm sure there are other people out there who can explain this better, but I've done everything I can to break this down. And I'll tell you one thing, without boasting here, so far, our damn analysis has been spot on. Now, we're wrong early, but then 1 year later, you'll hear somebody say breaking news, gold's being tokenized, something like that. And I've seen this over and over, guys, okay? So I don't think I'm wrong. It's just I don't have the expertise to really explain how this is being done. But it isn't Bitcoin. That much is freaking clear. So I do think XRP is just going to play a critical role as far as the digital counterpart to this basket of commodities. And let me tell you something, gold will be central. That's all.
I think you explained that phenomenally. So you got to give yourself more credit. That was a great explanation. I think anyone could understand that. So that was amazing.
Yeah, the other side of this, but thanks so much for that, is that gold is neutral and agnostic and not politically connected. Oh, well, the counterpart for that is XRP, which is neutral, agnostic, and not politically connected. I mean, that much at least is clear. So you could say it could be treated very similarly. And again, I don't care what David Schwartz says. I don't care about what Brad Garlinghouse says. Now, I admire these people because, they make good speeches. They do a lot of the bridging and all the legwork, you could say. But I do my own research and I'll try to come up with my own critical analysis. I won't feed off what other people are saying. And Like David Schwartz said something the other day. He retracted his statement on a high XRP price. That doesn't make sense. And you know, the first question I asked myself is like, why did David Schwartz leave Ripple? Maybe there's something else we don't really know. Maybe he was pushed out. Who knows? It's just there are many times he's said things and then he retracts his statements. Okay. For me, that's not somebody I could listen to or trust. And I can't even trust David Schwartz because he worked for the National Security Agency. Okay. So I'm just very cautious with who I listen to. But it's pretty damn clear if you do your research that these trends are happening in real time. Maybe we're just early. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think we also can't forget about how, you know, we're kind of going away from the days of globalization. And now we're seeing obviously the rise of BRICS and how America is going to combat that. So it would make sense to have a more neutral settlement rather than just having the dollar as the world reserve currency.
I agree with you. I don't think the dollar will. I mean, the real question is like, how long is it going to take for the world to be able to adopt this infrastructure before the dollar goes bust? Because the purchasing power is already dead. And they're trying to push this on to ordinary people who are so fearful. It's called panic selling. And I wrote this detailed article, and it's spot on about how these institutions use narrative containment, like they're doing with gold right now. And they're getting people to sell their assets. So they try to turn your fear into their profit. And that much is clear. We've seen this over and over. So,
yeah, I mean, definitely panic selling is a thing. And I think you do a really good job at keeping your audience very calm because, you know, unfortunately, we are creatures of emotions. And it is easy when you see, you know, prices either going up or down and wanting to sell or buy. And that's really the times when you don't want to do anything.
No, I agree. And I try my best, but I can get a bit temperament when I look at the comments, and it really frustrates me sometimes when I'm really doing this with good intentions. Okay. I'm here to make my life better. You know, help the audience, of course, build a community. But sometimes it's just certain people don't see things the way we do. And of course, I have to respect that. It's just how many times do I have to keep putting out the same information for people to figure this stuff out for themselves, right? And all I want is what's best for all of us. And one thing is pretty damn clear. You need to have some skin in the game about where settlement infrastructure is going. Edo, you mentioned getting rid of meme coins, consolidating assets into real value. And that's where capital is going to be absorbed. I agree with you entirely. But that means you need to be focusing on settlement infrastructure. That's where the value is going to begin. Okay. Well, whoever dominates the settlement infrastructure is going to dominate the entire financial ecosystem, because that's how the dollar has survived. And that's why the dollar is the reserve currency. It is the instrument for settlement in all transactions. Okay. Eventually, that's not working for anybody anymore. It's not even working for us. So imagine what governments are going through. Okay. I hate the dollar as much as the next person because it buys my groceries, but my purchasing power, my freedom is gradually being stolen because of their abuse of it and misuse. So I don't have to play their game anymore. So what am I doing? I'm buying hard assets to preserve that. And for those who've been holding gold, we've been calling this at $1,600, silver at 23. I mean, you've done very well if you've been holding real metals. Like, I sleep good at night knowing that my assets are preserved. And that if something bad happened, you know, to me or to somebody else, I could use that to be liquid and have some freedom when my freedom is being taken away. So it's deeper for me, you know?
Yeah, and the thing is, too, people kind of will laugh at you if you're holding physical gold or silver, but physical gold and silver is still extremely liquid. You could go to any coin dealer and get cash right away if you needed to. So I think that argument, I hear this argument online a lot. I think it's really stupid.
Yeah, I agree with you. Edo. I went on a tantrum there. Sorry, guys.
I want to just quickly address David Schwartz's statements. I actually made a video about that. Well, first, I would not take any financial advice from David Schwartz. He's someone that he sold all of his Ethereum to install solar panels when Ethereum was actually below like $20. So this already tells you a lot of his financial decisions. He also mentions he sold XRP at 10 cents because he would never expect XRP would go above 10 cents. So this only highlights how many times he's changing his mind. And I just don't trust his opinions for financial decisions. I know he's number one when it comes to technical capabilities of the XRP ledger. There is no doubts about it, but it seems that he has some sort of hyper focus where he understands too much about the technical capabilities of blockchain technology, but too little about the macro scenario, and that tells you a lot. I think I'm not talking down on David Schwartz. I'm just pointing out that you should be able to actually take your own financial decisions, and I don't think David Schwartz is the right person to actually tell you to do so. So I disagree with a lot of things that he says, even though I learned a lot when it comes to the infrastructure of the XRP ledger from David Schwartz presentations.
Yeah. I mean, I've learned a lot from many of the puppet heads that are speaking about this technology. I mean, it really helped me in the early days, like figure out, okay, what am I looking at? What am I investing? You know, knowing what you own, what you hold. Cold storage, self-custody. I think these things are very important. But, you know, overall, it's become like clear that like whatever they're saying now is almost like aligned with what we've been talking about, trying to shake people out, trying to give them fear, give them a reason to sell their XRP, give them a reason to sell all their assets. So, you know, I think we just have to be very cautious. At the end of the day, you need to somehow preserve your wealth and you need to make your own informed decisions. Mm-hmm. Now, I do believe gold and silver, anything real, tangible assets should be treated as your tier one asset strategy. Basically, that comes first, your first line of defense, if you will, then planning for the future. We know things are going digital, and you know, there's certain technology out there that certainly will provide some value, and I would say kill a lot of the friction in the system. That's where I'm putting my money.
Yeah.
Okay? Where I talk, right?
And I think also people understanding that about 25% of your net worth should be in precious metals. You know, people should not be just having a bunch of cash in the bank. It's not wise. You're not protecting yourself. You're not preserving your wealth. People really need to understand like what percent of their money should be invested in cryptocurrencies, in precious metals. And unfortunately, you know, your financial advisor is probably not going to tell you that. They're going to want you in the market. And I told a story the other day on my show actually about how I had a family member who back in, I believe it was 2021 time, she rolled over her 401k into silver and made a great profit, obviously. You know, I mean, look at the price of silver last week. And unfortunately, a few months ago, when she had an early retirement, she had another meeting with her financial advisor, and he told her, oh, silver's not going to go up anymore. Take your profit, get back into the stock market. They don't have your best interests in mind. You know, you have to think for yourself, and you need to be able to preserve your wealth. And it's pretty devastating to think how much money she could have made.
I agree with you. All right. So we are approaching the hour now. Well, I think we're past it. I just want to give some final thoughts. And of course, I want to hear your final thoughts. But sometimes I do get emotional on these podcasts, and I shouldn't. But again, it's coming from the right place. So what I'm trying to do here is grounded in reality. Okay. I really do not operate from a level of fear. And I don't want the audience to either. Like, I just don't want people to go ahead and sell their physical assets simply because prices are being pushed down artificially. What we're witnessing, you know, it's a reflection of just the magnitude of how much control these people are after. We see a lot of manipulation that's layered on top of leverage too. So what they're trying to do essentially is psychological. This is psychological warfare. They're trying to scare people back into dollars and the fiat currencies. So eventually you own nothing. Okay. And sadly, the system is too fragile right now. There's a lot of uncertainty. Geopolitics, we didn't even talk about that. Maybe another time. It's just, again, too much information. So I just want people to be prepared. And I've said this before, you should have some physical cash on hand. It does make sense. Okay. Even if it's being debased. I carry cash for an emergency. If banks experience stress, which they're going to, you're going to need liquidity in a short period of time until things start rolling again. So just being able to operate on a day-to-day basis without the dependence on financial intermediaries, that is from a risk management perspective. It's not fear, it's responsibility. Same thing goes with holding gold and silver. So again, I just want to reiterate that you need to have real wealth preserving assets. And of course, you want to be positioned for the future where this is all going. So I just want to give everybody some encouragement. You know, it's not doom and gloom from my perspective here. It's just these are the facts that we're dealing with. We're all confronted with the same realities.
Well, thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun, and I hope I can come back on some other time and we can continue to talk about everything. But yeah, I think you are absolutely right. It's really clear what they're trying to do. They're trying to pump up the dollar right now, scare us out of gold and silver. And I think right now, keep your eyes on the target. Don't be distracted by all of these weird psyops. Yeah, and if you guys want to be able to support me and follow me, I do have a show called Free the Money. I have a lot of really amazing guests on, a lot of developers, people in cryptocurrencies, gold and silver experts. So definitely check that out. It's just my YouTube channel is just Bree Teressi.
Okay, we'll add the link in the description. Thanks so much, Bree.
Thank
Edo,
you.
do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, just send a special thanks to Bree for joining us. Hopefully she'll come again on the show. And as she said, people have to think for themselves. I think this is critical in this moment with so much markets manipulation around and all of these distractions. And overall, I also want to send a special thanks to the audience. Drop in the comments your location so you help us to boost the algorithm so the live is going to get delivered to more people. And yeah, I think we can close. It's above 1 hour. So thank you, everyone. We're going to see you next Monday.
This was fun. Thanks again. And take care, everyone. Stay tuned. Bye.
Bye.